From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here on a Thursday. We have a good show on tap for you. As you know, oftentimes on Thursday we do open phones, but we did that earlier this week to accommodate this program and our wonderful guests, and a topic right now that's making a lot of headlines here in the mid-state region, the issue of domestic violence, which is always an important issue to talk about, but really here in Nashville has taken on additional, I think, importance in light of some recent developments. You've probably been following the case of well-known General Sessions Judge Casey Moreland, some questions about his involvement with an early release of a domestic violence suspect. The police chief here in Nashville, Steve Anderson, sending a very, I think, strongly worded memo, raising questions about how all this, plays out. And if you sift through some of the back and forth, and there's a lot of things going on here, folks, ultimately what we want this to get down to is how we can best handle these domestic violence cases to make sure the victims are not re-victimized, that they feel safe, and that the judicial process works its way through the way it should. So that's what it really comes down to. But we can take your phone call, 737-7587, as we go along. You may hear things you want to jump in on, but let's introduce our guests to you this morning. To my immediate left is Cathy Gurley with You Have the Power. Nice to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Well-known local victims advocacy group. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
And you brought joined this morning by a victim, a domestic violence victim, and we're going to hear Stacy's story here in just a moment. Stacy, it's nice to see you.
Thank you
for
nice
coming
to meet
on.
You.
And next to you, who is this guy? News Channel 5 legal analyst Nick Leonardo. Thank you for coming on. I'm glad to have you here to give some legal perspective on how all of this works. I kind of want to start with Nick, if that's all right, and then you guys jump in. But Nick, a lot of the debate right now with all of this controversy with the judge and the police chief is this 12-hour cooling off period, and the question of the discretion that a judge uses to decide whether to maybe recommend the commissioner waive that and let someone get out prior to that, which appears to have happened, and this individual is accused of going after this victim again. So talk about that. Under the law, a judge has this discretion, does he not?
That's correct, Nick. We have night court magistrates that work down at the Criminal Justice Center, and if you're arrested, you would go before them. And if you have a lawyer with you, or you're aware that there's the ability to waive the 12-hour hold, you could ask the commissioner, and they may very well do that for you.
Why would they? What would you say to them and say, let's first clarify, if you would, what's this 12-hour wait period supposed to do? It's supposed to make sure that this offender cools off and doesn't run out.
Well, it's to protect the victim, there's no doubt about it. And that is the victim could have some time to maybe relocate or get her affairs in order, and and so that everything would hopefully pan out for her and down the road. But sometimes you see in my line of work, you will see a case that's a husband and wife, and it's something that happened last week, and somebody accidentally fell and hurt their elbow or something like that, and now they've done a report and they're trying to get a warrant, but yet for the last week they've lived together or something like that. There's a chance that could be waived, but again, having that waived is a privilege, and if you are indigent and you just come in off the street, chances are that's just not going to be waived arbitrarily. You have to either have access to a lawyer at that point in time or know someone. But the law is discretionary. It does permit for that to be waived. And Judge Moreland is a great judge here in Davidson County. We need more like him. And if he made a mistake, then
he admitted, he said he made a mistake.
Well,
he said that.
But these judges go with the best information that's given to them at that time. It's no different than me going to any criminal court judge and asking them to set a bond on a probation violation, and me saying, Judge, this is my understanding of the facts. I don't think anybody intentionally misleads anyone, but this is the last thing you want to see. This is why the 12-hour hold is there, and when these things happen, it really draws attention to an ongoing problem. And I believe in this case, the hold was waived twice.
Yeah, which is just like, wow, how does that happen? Now, Cathy, let me ask you, if under the law and the way it's set up, judges have some discretion. We all know judges can make mistakes. We're all human.
Everyone can make a mistake.
And so what is your take on that? I think Nick kind of laid out how that is. How do you address that?
I don't believe it should be optional. I think it should be mandatory. One of the things that victims need to know is that when they come to the system, and as you well know, it sometimes takes many years, many months for them to even get up the courage to do that. They have to know that they're going to be protected.
Absolutely. Yeah, or they're not going to come forward.
Or they're not going to come forward, which is just going to increase the problem.
But I think it's important to point out also that there's an arrest that takes place, and there's this 12-hour hold. But in addition, when you get out, there is a condition of bond that is attached to your release, and it says that you're not allowed to have contact with the victim. So even though whether or not the 12-hour hold is waived, there's still a provision that says if you go back and have any contact with that victim, your bond will be revoked and you'll be placed back in jail. So there are several protections around that, in addition to the 12-hour hold.
As you know, with domestic violence, I believe is very different than many other crimes. The level of emotions are just ramped up there, because here it's a crime against somebody with whom you've had an intimate relationship, that you've bared your soul to, and you're betrayed by them, and it works both ways. And that's why I do believe that domestic violence has to have a very special considerations.
I agree.
It's just interesting when you said that about domestic violence cases. The big breaking news story I was doing in the newsroom this morning is there's a manhunt underway as we speak in Tullahoma. The most dangerous call officers go on are domestic violence calls. These two officers, Tullahoma, arrived at the scene where a couple was getting into it. Guy pulls a gun and fires shots, then throws the gun down and takes off. No one was hit, thankfully, as far as we know. No officers injured, but he's at large now. But I'm just talking, that's an example of the emotion and the tension and the most dangerous.
Absolutely.
Right then. So I can see why a cooling off period is needed. Now Stacy, as a domestic violence victim, what she was just talking about, how important is it then, to know or be confident that, you can be protected when you come forward?
It is the utmost importance. I was a child that grew up in it, and I grew up when it was still behind closed doors, and we had the good old boy system. Just go for a walk, please. Or it was leave. But we still have that today, and that's the problem. You still get those officers that aren't properly trained that need to be trained. You don't send them for a walk. You don't send them down the street for a biscuit or any of that. I think the 12 hours is not long enough.
Yeah, I mean, is that an arbitrary number, Nick? I mean, I guess the lawmakers came at that, but how long is enough to know it's out of someone's system? I don't know that if it's as heated as you talk about it, 2 weeks is enough.
I don't think it's really out of their system. I believe it needs to be at least a 24-hour period.
Okay.
That way it gives the mother, because she's got to gather up her children, try to find a safe place. She needs to be able to put her thoughts together. 12 hours is, if you really think about it, when you're in fear for your life, which growing up in it, we were constantly in fear for our life.
But here's the thing that kind of hits me on it. And again, these individuals accused of a horrible crime, but still are innocent until proven guilty. We don't know that that person's guilty of assaulting this wife yet at this point, or vice versa. But isn't it true that right now, Cathy could pull out a gun and shoot me in the leg and go in and, they post a bond and she's out in 2 hours?
Not if that happened in Decatur County.
Oh, okay.
You might have to stay in there a little longer, as we see.
But you know what I'm saying? I mean, there wouldn't be a hold on her and she just shot me. And yet, in a domestic, I'm not trying to minimize one crime or the other, but it's just interesting. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you'd only be, you'd be held as long as it would take for you to post bond. There's no hold on you and you just shot me.
What was the chance of her coming back after you?
Well, she probably was pretty darn mad the first time when she shot me, wouldn't it be?
Well,
but a lot of times.
Let me ask you, ladies. I'm sorry. Let me ask y'all what you think about this. I've heard that sometimes that hold may increase the animosity that the alleged perpetrator has against the alleged victim. And what do y'all think about that? In certain.
Absolutely, that happens.
It does. It puts you at a higher risk of being killed once he's released.
The 12-hour hold.
Once he's released after that 12-hour hold.
After the 12 hours, or even an hour, or whatever the judge decides.
I think the arrest is what triggers it. If they're angry that they're arrested.
Yeah.
So I think the danger.
So they come out, but you know that. So the point being is that 12 hours gives you time to prepare yourself for when this banshee gets out angry, right?
Absolutely.
To get away.
To get away, to get your possessions, to get your family, and move someplace where you can, in a shelter or whatever it takes, to be safe.
Yes.
But you need, and you think
3 hours is not long enough.
Of course not.
And then to have him not only rearrested for victimizing her worse and beating her, and to be rearrested and released again after 3 hours.
Yeah, that
is not enough time.
But, I think it's important to point out, I do a lot of work with the Mary Parrish Center, and it's a great facility, and they see the worst of the worst cases, and so being a defense attorney, a lot of times you will, the worst of the worst cases, those folks are going to be placed under the jail. I mean, and there's no doubt about it. But there's another set of cases that come through the system that there are no marks, and it's a husband and wife, and one person said this, the other person says that, and sometimes it seems like they are constantly sort of abusing the system, and there's really, there are no marks or these allegations that are contained there in these order protections and these general sessions civil warrants too. I mean, or not civil warrants, but the arrest warrants. And so, there's got to be some way to kind of manage the system, because some of the cases that come through there definitely, are.
Don't you think then that? And I agree. I mean, don't you think then that's why lawmakers? We'll go to a break in a moment. Created the 12-hour hold, which I think we all agree is good. You'd like to see it longer, but that these judges who are elected and make hundreds of decisions every day are given some discretion to look at what Nick was just talking about.
Human nature being what it is, there may be some false claims at some point, but I want to be very clear that domestic violence does not just show itself physically. No, there are also emotional scars that are not going to show up. You don't have to be black and blue to have been abused.
Yeah. All right, listen, on that note, we need to take a break. When we come back, we'll take some phone calls. We'll get more into all this. You might share your story with us?
Yes.
Okay, if you don't mind, I really appreciate you doing that. We'll take a break. We'll be back with more right after this.